On a calm sea north of the Philippines, a graveside service that was impossible until now.
On the 1st of July 1942, the Japanese vessel, the Montevideo Maru, was sunk at this precise location in the South China Sea.
Approximately 1,060 prisoners were lost, including at least 979 Australians.
The measureless sea that we ride upon today holds no marker of that tragedy. Those lost here served our nations well and honourably.
Thanks to John Mullen and his team, we now have a marker to the tragedy. The wreck itself split in two on the seabed 4,000 metres below.
I hate that word, bringing closure. I say it rules a line under it for all the families that were affected.
Little by little, the dark shadow of Japan's new order spreads.
The prisoners lost on the Montevideo Maru had been captured during Japan's lightning invasion of New Guinea.
Rabaul, on the island of New Britain, soldiers, sailors and airmen of Imperial Japan can attempt to break the fragile hold of Americans and Australians.
In June 1942, the prisoners were loaded aboard the Montevideo Maru and vanished. For 3 years, their families heard nothing of them. Among the missing, Kim Beasley's uncle, Sydney.
Dad used to tell me a story which still brings me to tears, and that's of my cousin, who hadn't known what had been the fate of her father during the course of the war. And one of my uncle's brothers returned from the islands. He was demobbed soldier in New Guinea, and he came through the door, and she thought it was her father because he looked so like the picture of her father. So she raced to him, found it was her uncle instead, and she spent the rest of the day in tears.
Andrea Williams' family tried to find out what had happened to her grandfather, Philip Coote. She's now aboard the search vessel in the South China Sea.
They'd sent letters to the Red Cross trying to find out information where their husband's a prisoner. They would listen to the radio at night time where they would radio prisoners, names of people who were prisoners, and they'd listen for the name.
It took years for the prisoners' fate to be made public.
Nobody actually really knew what had happened until the Japanese archives were capable of being inspected at the conclusion of World War II.
The Montevideo Maru had been torpedoed off the Philippines by a US submarine. The only survivors were Japanese soldiers and crew. The absence of a wreck deepened the agony of the families.
There were, in the early days, many questions because nobody knew anything. And there were questions about whether it even existed, to be honest. Was it a furphy?
On the 70th anniversary of the sinking, a memorial to the disaster was unveiled at the Australian War Memorial.
In one night in 1942, nearly twice as many Australians lost their lives as did in the 10 years of the Vietnam War. They, their families, deserve to be remembered.
For the past 5 years, a team led by Telstra chairman John Mullen had been preparing to go one step further and find the Montevideo Maru.
People have joked that it wasn't a needle in a haystack. We had to spend years looking for the haystack. Now, having found the haystack, you then had to find the needle.
The search began earlier this month. An uncrewed submarine, an AUV, began scouring the seabed off the northern Philippines.
The extreme depth is a barrier. Over 4 kilometres down, you're at the limits of most modern technology.
After each mission, the AUV returned to the surface with a vast cache of data.
Finally, up came the image of the ship, and I think it was a eureka moment.
That is seriously exciting stuff. Ready? Yeah, I've got a...
The ship is split in two, but parts are remarkably intact.
One of the early images was of the foremast, which is still standing, with the cross trees and the little bosun's chair made of wire, and the stays still standing. They all matched absolutely perfectly, and that was sort of lump in the throat stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. You are very, very, very.
Yes, we've got it. And of course, that closes a chapter because you know that the families are going to be just so delighted that they have validation.
Over the weekend, the AUV has been sent down again. It's come back with 3D scans of the wreck and detailed images of a Japanese truck and a car and trailer with a mounted machine gun. This is the first time these images have been shown, the beginning of a wider knowledge of the Montevideo Maru disaster.
Now will have much more prominence, because what will happen now, I'm sure, is that wreck will be filmed extensively. It will never be interfered with because it is now a burial ground.
The wreck site marks a loss for 14 nations, including, of course, Japan. 20 guards and crew died at sea, and the memorial service finished with an acknowledgement of those men as well. A clutch of colourful Japanese paper cranes cast into the South China Sea.